Hello, everyone. Welcome for today's webinar. Today, I would like to go over some puzzle flow. We can start with, if everybody, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you see a CC button. You can click at the CC, and then you will have the subtitle. So please and welcome to the webinar.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited that you are here to join us today. Thank you so much for coming. And we are going to be introducing ourselves, Karina and I, and then move forward with our program. So my name is Laura Girardo, and I'm currently completing my Bachelor's of Education to become a teacher at Queen's University. And I would love to, I'm also on my way to becoming a teacher of the deaf, so I'm very excited about that. I've also completed my master's degree in disability studies at York University, and I have done my media production degree at Ryerson University. So as you can see, education is my life, and I'm really proud to do that. And I'm going to pass you on to Karina.
Okay, so on to the next slide. So hi everybody, my name is Karina Cotran and I'm currently in the field of communications. And right now I am on the board of directors as the director for Voice of the Teen Outreach Program. And I also published a collection of short stories about growing up with hearing loss, and I'm currently authoring a blog. So my goal is to help become a self-advocate in the deaf and hard of hearing community. So just a quick reminder, everyone, if you have any questions, make sure to save it for the end of the presentation. We have a Q&A session. So let's dive right in. So just to do a quick overview of what we'll be talking about the difference in accommodation in high school versus university and college, how to choose the right university and college, how to get accessibility services, scholarships, financial aid, and we're ending off with a Q&A. So we won't be going over the resources section. The resources is a reference guide that is at the end of the PowerPoint that you can review in your own time. Hopefully everybody got a copy of the PowerPoint beforehand, and the resources will list a bunch of useful links and more in-depth information on the topics that we discussed in this seminar.
Alrighty, so throughout our presentation, we're going to be asking everyone some questions that we would love for you to fill out. And we're going to give you about 10 seconds to fill it out and then reveal the results later to get to know our amazing audience. We really appreciate you guys coming today, and yeah, we hope that you enjoy. Before I introduce the poll, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A button on the bottom. So it should be right next to the CC button, and we'll make sure to answer it toward the end. All right, and without further ado, here's poll number 1. Hopefully, there you go.
We'll give you 10 to 15 seconds to answer.
Yes. All right, so we're going to end it right there. So can we please see the results of the poll? Maybe not. Oh, there you go. Heck yes, awesome. We're so excited that you guys are excited as well. All righty, next slide.
Let's jump right in. So there are three main differences that I personally found when you're comparing accommodations in high school versus university and college. So it's class size, advocacy, and accessibility options. Let's get into each of them.
So class size, this may seem obvious, but the big difference between high school and post-secondary is that the class sizes are very different. So usually the average high school class is around 25 to 35 students. But when you go to a post-secondary class, the average size ranges around 100 to 400 people. And this is obviously dependent on program, dependent on school. So that is something that you guys should definitely have a look out for. All right.
And next is advocacy. I think this is a pretty big one. I find that in high school, you do typically have a lot of help on hand with your teachers, itinerant teachers, and guidance counselors. These types of people would advocate on your behalf and speak for you. So coming from a personal experience, this is a big shift going from high school to university, because in university, the only person that's going to advocate for you is you. And as someone who had people speak for me almost all of my life up until university, I did encounter several challenges. One was I did not realize that you could access accessibility services beforehand going into university. And the second one was I had a big gap in my knowledge of the types of accommodation that they provided. So when I was asked, oh, what types of accommodation are best for you? I didn't really know. So that is one big thing, right? You need to learn how to self-advocate for yourself and how to do that. So moving on.
Awesome. So accessibility options. Usually high school is limited in funding with accessibility options. So it reduces the need for more options, and things like an FM system or, quiet space or room, it's all dependent on your high school. You may have gotten the accommodations or not, but like I said, it is dependent on your program and your school. Whereas in university and college, there are different types of accessibility options depending on the institutions. The usual accessibility options include a note taker and a sign language interpreter. The other thing also to note is if you are part of a hearing center at a high school, you may have gotten some accommodations given to you for quote unquote free, where you didn't have to pay for the services. Whereas in university and college, you may have to pay for the service, such as an FM system. And that can be also covered through funding, through financial aid, through the government, which is something that we will discuss later in the webinar.
So on to our next poll. So just a heads up, we will be doing random polls throughout the presentation, so please keep an eye out for those. Let's get ready for question number 2. Again, I'll give you 10 to 15 seconds to answer the question, and then I'll show the results. Okay, let's see them. Interesting. So we have 30% of attendees that are attending post-secondary in September 2020. Well, congratulations to all of you. And for the rest of you, we'll find out who you are and what you're doing.
Awesome.
So now that you know the differences in accommodation between high school and university and college, the next step is choosing the right university and college. How do you know which post-secondary institution is the right one for you? Well, the answer remains to be this. You're going to have to do some research.
All right, so like I mentioned before, the reason we keep bringing up class sizes is because I believe that it is something incredibly important to look at. We're used to, in high school, a small classroom of 25 to 30 students, and the room itself is very small. And whereas when you go to a university or a college, you may be in a lecture hall, and it's a big space, and depending on where you're sitting, the professor can be very small if you're right at the back. So you may want to sit at the front. But if you're sitting at the front, is there a stage? So is your head, do you feel like your head is looking up in the air? So there's the seating is very important for where you want to be sitting. Also, how interactive are the classes? Is there going to be a lot of speakers coming on in front of the room to present whatever they need to present? Is it a type of classroom where you need to be in a group setting and you have to talk to group members? So it's all, like I said, dependent on the program, but this is something you should definitely keep those questions in mind.
So in terms of accessibility options, there's quite a bit out there, and it's important to research the different types of accommodations that are out there to find out which one suits you and your level of hearing loss. What might work for another hard of hearing person may not necessarily work for you. So some examples of accessibility options out there are sign language interpreting, communication access real-time translation, commonly known as CART, assistive listening devices like the FM system, and note-taking. I find that it's good to research these beforehand, especially when you go ahead and speak with somebody at the accessibility center at your post-secondary school. You want to know what kind of accommodations are out there, just to see if it's something that may be provided to you, even if it's not on their list of accommodations. I personally did note-taking, but for the other types of accommodations provided, I actually did a blog post, right? And I highlighted different people's experiences with each type of accommodation. So if you're interested and want to check it out, it's in the resource section of the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. All right. So choosing the right university and college, it's always important to ask questions. I would recommend to book a meeting with the Accessibility Center to find out exactly what types of accommodations they offer, and if it's possible to get a certain type of accommodation that's not on their list. To give you an example from my previous experiences, so in Ontario, we have a big university fair in downtown Toronto, where they have every university from Ontario, even outside of in Canada themselves, where you can go to their booths and ask questions about, university and what they have there. And college has this as well. And I found that it was very important to talk to them about what they offered. I'm not going to list some of the universities, but there were some universities I thought I would be interested in, and I decided not to go because I wasn't really thrilled with what they were offering accommodation-wise. Some universities didn't make that their main priority, and unfortunately, that is a huge deal breaker for me. So the universities that I did choose, I found that they were incredibly helpful. Now, like I also mentioned, just because the universities I went to is not the university you want to go to, I'm not saying that that's bad, but that's why I'm saying communication is very, very important. And you want to know, how do you register for the accommodations, what deadlines and documents are required. And the accessibility centers themselves are incredibly busy. So I would recommend the earlier, the better to reach out to them, because then they can book an appointment with you, they can meet with you, and you guys can make sure that you have everything you need for a successful school year.
And just to add on to Laura's point, another thing that's important about choosing the right university and college is also to make sure that you enjoy yourself while you're on campus. The whole experience of post-secondary is to discover what you like to do and where you want to go in your life. So just keep that in mind as well. It's not always about your hearing loss. This is just something that will just make the transition a bit more easier. So, poll question number 3. Let's see it. Just waiting for it to pop up.
So
We're getting 10 to 15 seconds, and let's see who is in high school right now. Okay, let's see the results. So 19% of you are in high school and 81% of you are not. That's interesting. Okay, so moving on. Whoops. Okay, so the important thing, as Laura said before, it's important to do everything sooner rather than later. Like Laura said, the Accessibility Center is very, very busy. The closer you get to the first day of school, the harder it is to get everything set up in time for the first day. So you want to reach out to your school's Accessibility Center and book an appointment as soon as possible. I recommend doing this right after you get your acceptance, like right after. I can't stress this enough because I did not do that. I went on my first day of school, didn't go to the Accessibility Center, and I did spend the first couple of weeks kind of floundering around and panicking because of, you know, being scared that I missed something while I was in class, or how do I get this audiogram right now? I need to go back to my high school and get an IEP, which might be one of the documents required. It was just a big mess, and I'd rather anyone else not go through that. You want to enjoy your first couple of weeks of school and, you know, be excited about the fact that you are going to a post-secondary school. You're done high school. And I did not have that experience, so, you know, it would be nice for other people too. So book that appointment as soon as possible.
awesome. And just sorry, really quickly, if I can go back to that other slide, really quickly for from my point of view, I found that the Accessibility Center was incredibly helpful for me. As you know, college and university is a huge new adventure for all of us. We are entering a new, different life and experience. And I personally came from a bubble where I was advocated for, and I was used to having someone help me on that point, whereas I had to learn how to become a self-advocate. So I found that becoming a self-advocate, I was able to go to the Accessibility Center, tell them these are the sources and accommodations I need, and they were able to help me, help me a lot. And if there was any issues or problems, I felt I had the courage and the confidence to do so, all thanks to the accommodation office.
So the next step is, once you meet with your accessibility advisor, it's good to have a list of questions prepared beforehand. So adding on top of the several questions that were mentioned at the beginning of the seminar, some sample questions that you might want to have prepared are, what type of accommodations does the school provide for hearing loss? What type of documents are needed to be eligible for those accommodations? Each university or college do have different types of documents. One might need only an IEP, another one might need an IEP and an audiogram. Another school might need an IEP, audiogram, and a reference letter. There are so many different types of documents, so make sure that you ask this question so that you have everything done beforehand. And the next one is, what other steps do I have to take to make sure that I get those accommodations right from the first day? And just to see how your accessibility advisor would advocate for you as well, what happens if a professor is not accommodating me as promised? What would the accessibility advisor do? That would help you prepare for the scenario where you might have to advocate on your own behalf to a professor, but that'll be covered in the second webinar.
Alrighty, so how do you get your accessibility services? it is really important to get the documents needed to be eligible for accommodations. So these include an IEP, an audiogram, or maybe a cover letter from a guidance counselor or a teacher of the deaf to help the institution know that you have been receiving these accommodations at high school. I cannot stress enough that those two documents are the most important to give to them, just because it proves that your eligibility, and if you don't have it, you may face some trouble. But then again, this is where your self-advocacy piece comes in, and you have that conversation with your accommodation advisor to make sure that you are getting everything you need to ensure a great year. The other thing, we've mentioned this before, but basically taking a campus tour. I believe it is so important to do that. Obviously, this is, again, dependent on where you want to go. So if you live in one province and want to go to another, if you're able to fly there, that's awesome. But if you're able to go to a campus tour, I would highly recommend it. You know, try sitting into a lecture hall. How does that feel for you? It's going to be very different than a classroom. Maybe get a feel for, is this where I can see myself? Is this where I can see myself thriving? And not just on a hearing loss level, but even like as a student. Do you see yourself roaming around the halls and roaming around the campus and just feeling like a student? I know that I did that, and it was just amazing. And if anything, it made me more excited to attend school in the next following year. So I believe that that's really important. Alrighty, so step 5. So the last thing that you need to do is to submit your documents and make sure that the accommodations are available on the first day before class starts and onwards. This is, again, where you have your self-advocacy piece and communicate with your accommodation advisor. They are very good at letting you know what needs to be submitted or not. And once that is done, again, this is something we're going to catch up on in webinar 2, but once that is done, the accessibility advisor will let you know how to actually implement the accommodations. You have the choice of either speaking out to the professors yourself or having the accommodation advisor do that for you, depending on your comfortability of letting the professor know about your hearing loss. I, for one, would recommend you do it yourself. That way that the professor knows you for who you are and not just as a number. And if a situation arises, they're able to know how they can help you quicker. There would be less conflict, but again, this is absolutely up to you. You have every right to not disclose your hearing loss. But yeah, if you have any questions about that, you can let us know.
So poll question number 4. Right. Oh, and a side note, I can see all the chats coming in. I'll help reiterate those at the end of the session. You make some very good suggestions. Okay, let's see number 4. If you were in high school, what grade are you in? Okay, let's see the results. Okay, we have 14% in grade 10, another 14 in grade 11, and 71 in grade 12. Okay, I'm glad to see that we also have some of the younger grades in this webinar. I hope you're learning something. Okay, so up next are scholarships. There are many scholarships that can help out there with that are centered around deafness, hard of hearing, and hearing loss. We have a more comprehensive list in the resource section, but for right now, we'll be focusing on the scholarship that Voice and CHA provide. So for any information on these scholarships, you can click on the link in this slide and it'll lead you straight into the section of the Voice website to talk about these scholarships. So we have the Louise Crawford Scholarship up first. The deadline is June 30th, and the amount that they offer to students vary from year to year. This is exclusively for Voice members that are entering a college or university in the fall of 2020. up next is the Canadian Hearing Society Scholarship. This is $3,000 a year for full-time students and $1,000 a year for part-time students. The deadline's coming up on May 20th. So if you qualify for this, make sure you apply right away. So the Canadian Hearing Society, this is for deaf or deafened students, and it's mainly focused on advocacy for students that help break down barriers to higher education.
Alrighty, so next up is the Child Scholarship Program, and that is for individuals that are either hard of hearing, deafened, or all deaf, with the promise that all applicants use spoken language as their primary use of communication. The deadline for that is June 1st, 2020. And they have 4 scholarships that are available, and they're each tailored to different needs, and they're all wonderful. So the first one is the Carol Hearn Memorial Scholarship. That amount is for $1,000, and it's open to all post-secondary students. The next one is the Dr. Charles A. Laszlo Scholarship. That amount is also for $1,000, and that is for an applicant who is enrolled in second or higher year of study in the area of science and technology and trades. The next one is the Frank Agel Memorial Scholarship. That amount is also for $1,000. It does not focus on any field of study. However, the advocacy level of the applicant is taken into account. And I also just want to mention, all of these scholarships that you mentioned will be in the resource link. And on the link itself, it'll list what each scholarship is and the description. So in case you forget from today's webinar, do not worry, it'll all be listed there. And the last one is the Susan Brown Memorial Scholarship. That one is $2,000, and it is offered to hard of hearing, late deafened, or oral deaf students entering their first year full-time program at a recognized Canadian college or university in any area of study, with the ultimate goal of obtaining a diploma, certificate, or a degree. And like I mentioned, the links for all of these scholarships will be listed on the resource page.
Right, before we dive into the last section on financial aid, we have one more poll. Woo! See the question.
Yay.
Lift it up just a little bit. Okay, let's see the results. How many of you are in post-secondary right now? Okay, so just 10%, and 90% of you are not in post-secondary. Interesting. Okay, moving on.
Amazing.
All right. Okay.
Alrighty, so on top of scholarships, there are financial aids, and this is something that you would discuss with your accessibility advisor at your post-secondary institution, as they should assist you in giving you a list of resources of what is available. So what we have here is not limited, they may have more. And also, since Karina and I are from Ontario, we're more comfortable explaining things from an Ontario point of view. But please know that every province and territory does have their own version of some sort with their financial aid. And this is something that you can talk about with their financial aid. So for example, if you are from Ontario, there is the Ontario Disability Support Program, or ODSP, and OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program. And both of those are financial aid that are either in loans or grants, depending on what you select. And they are extremely helpful. I know ODSP gives you financial aid on a monthly basis, whereas Ontario Student Assistance Program gives you money on a semester basis or a yearly basis, depending on what your situation is. There's also the British Columbia Disability Assistance for those who live in BC. And on a federal level, which means anyone in Canada can access these, we have the Canadian Student Grant for students with permanent disabilities, the Bursary for students with disabilities, and the equipment for persons with permanent disabilities. Usually the BSWD is in Ontario is linked with OSAP, but I know that it is a federal grant in general. The equipment scholarship is for those who need a laptop or any technology to help you with accommodations in the classroom. Usually it involves a write-up, but like I said, that's where your accommodation advisor comes in and they will make sure to help you get what you need. And I know I've experienced some of those, and I got the help I needed with my accommodation advisor, and she read my write-up and she helped me write up some things, and I couldn't have been more grateful for that.
Okay, so we're in the last poll of the webinar. What's the question?
Yeah.
So if you are in post-secondary, what year are you in? Okay, let's see the results. So we have 14% in second year, and then 86% in other. I'm just going to assume either you're a full-grown adult straight out of university or in your 5th year. I took a 5th year, so no judgment there. Or you're in high school. Okay, so we're going to head into the Q&A session, but before I jump in, I wanted to give a little bit more detail on the second webinar. The second webinar will be held on June 6th at the same time, 3:30 to 4:30 Toronto time. And some of the topics covered will be how to self-advocate for yourself, especially when you're doing a one-on-one with a professor, knowing your rights, and in today's day and age, exploring how you can do hearing loss and online classrooms. So that's it for today's webinar. Any questions? I think we can go back and click on the Q&A. So from Tracy, I work with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. May I share your PowerPoint with grade 12 students and their parents? Absolutely. If you need a copy, let Janice know and you'll get one. So you're more than welcome to share it.
Awesome. So I'm looking at the Q&A poll that has been submitted. So one of the questions says, how far in advance do you have to apply for financial aid from the government? This is really dependent on what the financial aid itself is. Usually you do have to apply months in advance. I would not recommend a few days or on the day of. This is where you need to do your research. From personal experience, I remembered if I had gotten into university, let's say May, I applied in April. Usually April, May, June is when the start is, and then that's where the deadline is as well. Again, it's been a while since I've applied, but usually it is months in advance, and that's where I would recommend you to look into that. Another question is, do you get assigned one accessibility advisor, or are there several over the year? Now, that is a very good question. It really depends on your institution. When I was at Ryerson University, for example, I think I had a different advisor every single year. And it wasn't because of the advisor themselves. It was more the person who was my advisor had a new job or a new position, so they moved on. But they did a very good job in letting me know, hey, just letting you know, I'm not your advisor anymore. Here's so-and-so, they're gonna be your advisor. And I know that sometimes it can be challenging. When it did happen to me, I was not a fan of it. I felt like I had to reintroduce myself, and it is challenging, but please know that they are not there to make your life challenging. They're there to help you out. And the fact that the accommodation advisor went above and beyond to let me know that I am going to be changed into a new advisor. When I went to, for example, Ryerson and Cranes, I've had the same accommodation advisor. So like I said, it really depends on who you're talking to. So
Yes, at my university, I went to UTM. I didn't have just one accessibility advisor. It was on a first come, first serve basis. So whoever I would manage to get an appointment with first was my accessibility advisor for that moment. So I see another question that says, did you ever feel lost in these large class sizes? You mentioned that there could be up to 400 students in the class. So in my first year of university, I had about a class of 500 to 600 people. That was really overwhelming at first. I think my biggest problem was, depending on the lecture hall, the acoustics could be very bad. But I managed to kind of solve that a bit by sitting at the very front row and having a note taker. And also, this is optional, I talked to my professor after the first class, and I said, listen, like, I have a hearing loss. Is there any chance that I could come to your office hours and see, like, if it's okay for me to ask questions after the class? And most of my professors were completely okay with it. But yes, it's easy to get lost in these classes. Like, you definitely become a bit of a number in university, but the best piece of advice I can give you is try to be as personable as possible, right? Have that number get turned into a name. So, try to establish a relationship with your professor. They're there to teach you, and they're normally very open to talking with you. Let's see. Another question is, are students responsible for purchasing assistive devices for use at post-secondary institutions? Yes, I didn't use an assistive device. That's a story for another time. Laura, did you use an assistive device?
yes, so sorry, I have to turn my light on because it was getting dark. Yes, students are responsible for purchasing their own assistive device. This includes an FM system, and I did have to purchase my own, and unfortunately it is not cheap. Speaking from my own personal experience in Ontario, I connected with Union Hearing Aid Center, and they provided me with an FM system. And in terms of covering for the cost, I was able to get an ADI. I don't remember the full name, I apologize, but hopefully some people may know what that means. It was like a government grant. And then on top of it, I was eligible for ODSP, so ODSP helped me pay for it. So that's what I meant by in high school, you got the FM yourself, but in university, you have to pay for it. The good news is you paid for it, it's yours. So you get to take care of it. You can bring it home. You can bring it to a restaurant. You can bring it to any event outside of school as well. And I found that incredibly helpful. When I was a child, I was not a fan of an FM system just because of the whole aspect of it. But obviously, as I grew older, I realized the importance of an FM system. So it worked out in the end because I got to use it outside, and I got to use it with my friends, and I got to use it in places I never thought I would need to bring it in. So hopefully that helps.
A question, what technology or strategy did you use to help you hear your peers during class discussion or group work? So I had to do a lot of group work. I was an English major, and I also took some writing classes. I thought for me, the best strategy was to fully disclose my hearing loss up front, especially when I'll be talking to my peers, my head's turned away, they call my name, and I don't hear them. It's just better for them to understand why I didn't hear them rather than they think that I ignored them. So that was one. I did a full disclosure. I also mentally assigned a hearing buddy. So I would just go up to my little hearing buddy at the end of class, or I'll nudge them during class and say, hey, like, I missed that. What did they say? And they're always willing to help. And, you can make some good fun that way too.
Yeah. And one question I just saw here that I thought was, sorry, just one little highlight that I wanted to mention. I said ADI, but I meant ADP, Assistive Devices Program. I just wanted to throw that out there because I knew it was 80 something. So thank you, Rosary, for letting me know that. The other question I would like to answer, one of them says, I was wondering if a professor still record their lectures and download later. This is dependent on the professors themselves and the institution. So I've had programs where the professor recorded the lecture, but it was an audio recording, and they were able to upload it on a school website, and you could listen to it later. Some professors do not like being recorded. Unfortunately, they need to move on with the technology world that we live in. So that is challenging for some of them. Again, that's where your accommodation advisor will come in to advocate for you to make sure that if you need a recording, you can. Some of the accommodations I got that I found were really helpful, because I think I saw a few of the similar questions. I had a real-time captionist with me. So that means that in class, I had a person that sat with me at all times, and I was able to read the screen and they captioned verbatim. That was really important for me to get that. I personally did not want a student note taker or a note taker that was just gonna type, a summary of what the class was about. It was really important for me to get a word by word of what was happening. There are many different ways you can do that. So when I went to Ryerson, I had the note taker sit right beside me so I can look at the screen. But now that technology is incredibly advanced, I was able to get a Skype note taker come in. So now that I'm at Queen's University, due to the location of Queen's, we weren't able to get an in-person note taker, but I was able to connect via Skype, and they were able to connect to the FM system and just type everything that they need from them. So again, it depends on the university, it depends on the accommodations. This is why talking to an accommodation advisor really helps. So hopefully that helps in terms of like, how do I, stay in a lecture? When you are in a lecture format, kind of picture, the best way I can describe a lecture to you is like a movie theater. If you've been to a movie theater, it's a big giant room, and I'm sure there's ways that you've chosen where you want to sit because of the hearing. I've had a lecture in a movie theater. That's the first thing that came to mind. And sometimes the professor will ask for students to, tell them their responses or whatever. And I have found that to be hard for me because I could be close to the front because my focus is on the professor, and it's like some dude 20 seats away from me is asking a question, and it's really hard. So that's where you also talk to your professor, again, if you're comfortable doing so, and ask them to repeat the questions if that helps. But yeah, so I got off track a little bit, but basically in the classroom, you can get a captionist to caption live for you. If you want a recording, that is something you have to talk to your professor about.
Okay, and just a quick reminder from our host, the webinar is being recorded for playback, so just know that if you're missing anything right now, you can just listen back to this webinar and get the answers that you want. So also to add on to what Laura was saying about accommodations, there was a question saying, hold on, I found it, can you choose more than one accommodation, drop or change as you go along? The answer is yes. So it does vary on the accessibility center that you go to, but it's very natural for somebody who's never had those types of accommodations to experiment with one or the other or both, just to see which one is best for them. And let's see, lots of questions, wow. How much authority does the accessibility department have to enforce access in the classroom? I've heard that some schools are better than others. This is correct. So my school did not have too much authority. I had to do a lot of speaking on my own behalf just because I don't know why, but that was just the case. It really does vary, right? So some schools may advocate for you strongly in the classroom, while others just say you're on your own, do what you can. Unfortunately, that's just how it works. Another question that I saw was, yes, it is possible to contact us via email. My contact is at, I think it's the last point on the resources page. Just email me and I'll copy Laura on the email as well so she can answer your questions. And
I think one question I saw here that was really important was, can accessibility service help with accommodations when living in residence? So I know I have never lived in residence before. I was the commuter. But I do know that there are a few accommodations that could be provided, such as a fire alarm within the, like a special fire alarm within the dorms. But this is something that you may have to do research on yourself. Unfortunately, I do not have the answer to that, and I apologize. But I know usually with any university, the dorms are usually for first year students. And then when you're in second and third and fourth year, you have to find a place yourself. So what I can tell you is that right now at Queen's University, so I'm from Toronto and I had to live in Kingston for school. And that was my first time moving out. And it was definitely a scary experience because I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But I am incredibly grateful that I had that experience. But the number one question I had was, how accessible is my house? How can I make my house accessible? And I am very grateful that I had a landlord who understood my needs and allowed me to install my own FM system, my own fire alarm, excuse me. And he was very accommodating and very understanding. Now, the fire alarms themselves are incredibly noisy and invasive. So if you have roommates, you definitely need to have a conversation with them to let them know, like, hi, like, if you see these devices lying around, please do not touch it. If you hear a sound, please know that it's for me. Especially, I don't know about you guys, but my alarm clock is like a vibrator, so it makes a lot of noise and sound. So I definitely let my roommates know to expect that. Again, thankfully, I've had a great experience, wonderful roommates, wonderful landlord. In terms of living in residence, that's something you can talk with the residence advisor and the school. In terms of moving in on your own, talk to your landlord. And if that's something that you feel like you're not getting accommodated for, I would definitely reach out to the Canadian Hearing Society, as they will know what to do to help you on that. And hopefully, yeah, that.
So we're reaching the end of our webinar. So unfortunately, we need to wrap up. If we have not answered your questions, please feel free to email me after this webinar and we'll get those answers for you right away. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it.
And good luck to everybody that's going to university or college in the fall. You'll have a lot of fun.
Yes, good luck. And thank you to all of the teachers of the deaf who've come on here. I've noticed a few of them say that. So thank you for your participation. And we hope that we were able to provide the information needed. So. All right.